Welcome back to the Talking with the SOT channel. This is a little different this time. We're going to go with a YouTube video. A bunch of students have reached out to me about level 2 drivetrains being really challenging. And they just wanted another voice. So I'm going to do my best to throw that up here for some added resources, a little bit extra help. I have my slideshow that I might run through. But let's just have a little chat first, start talking about drivetrains, getting you back in the swing of things from level 1. In level 1, we talked about the manual transmission and clutches mainly. And the whole point of level 1 is basically how do we get the power from the engine to where it needs to go. And I think level 2 takes a little bit of that and adds on to it. So we only talked about the clutch assembly and how to control it, and then the manual transmission and power flow. So let's add into some CV axles, drive shafts. We'll throw in a torque converter there, planetary gear sets, and a whole bunch of more components that are going to be doing it. Another thing that's different in level 2 is with level 1, you had to shift it. You were controlling it. So now in level 2, we have an automatic transmission that we're going to get to. One of my favorite things to teach because a lot of students shy away from it. A lot of students don't really understand how it's working. And if we can break that wall down and get you guys to fully capture what's going on inside of that, which really, it's not that difficult. It's just a vehicle. It's just a car, just like an engine. And I say this a lot to students too. I think engines may be more complicated than transmissions, but I think you guys like them better. They make sound. They make power. They're the fundamental of the vehicle that makes it move. But transmissions do a lot and add a lot in. So let's dive in and see how it goes. So what I'd like you to start with is when we talk about drivetrain components is what does that mean? Where does it start? Where is the beginning spot of it all? And I hope you guys are kind of thinking in your head, where would that look like? Some people may say transmission. Some people may say the engine itself. I'm going to go a little bit more specific, and I think the start point for that drivetrain component is going to be the crankshaft. You have an explosion in the cylinder that's going to push down on that piston. That's going to allow the connecting rod to shove that crankshaft around in a circle. And that starts that momentum that the car can use. Now, you can add a whole bunch of cylinders together. You can get a lot of torque, a lot of power. That bore size can be large, whatever that looks like. But that's going to be the start for the drivetrain components, in my opinion. Then beyond that is what we're going to talk about. So everything from that crankshaft or that mounting point for the flex plate or the flywheel all the way to the wheels are those drivetrain components. First lesson that we usually talk about is drive shafts and CV shafts. And you should have had a lab where you kind of inspect them, take them apart, take a look at them, see what the difference is, and work through them. So I have my slideshow up here. Let's jump into it quickly. I'm not going to read everything. We'll just kind of go over them fast, just so that you have an idea. And let's see how it goes. So let me transition this over. Boom. Look at, I'm down here now. This is pretty cool. I'm trying something new. I hope it works. So yeah, drive shafts level 2, and we start off with what comes out of the transmission, right? You see this rotating shaft with two crosses or two components that are going to allow it to have an angle. And it says the drive shaft must smoothly transfer torque while rotating, changing the length, and moving up and down, which is what it does. That suspension movement is imperative for the drive shaft. We need to allow that to move. Otherwise, it's going to be a rigid piece of rigid vehicle without that moving, and it would not be comfortable at all. A big factor when we talk about traditional drive shafts, rear wheel drive shafts, is the U-joints. And what we need to think about when we talk about U-joints is phasing. When I say phasing, that is the angles that the matching angles for the drive shaft. Let's put it that way. So if the angle from the slip yoke and the angle to the flange at the back are the same, then there should be no vibrations, and it makes it constant velocity where we have a straight transfer of power straight back to that differential. When they get out of phase, that means it's not constant velocity anymore. So when the angles are changed, when they're too steep or not matching, that means we're going to have a vibration or a frequency that's going to happen from that. And as that rotates, it's going to have a high spot. So if we have a high spot, that means we're going to have a vibration or feel that. Now, I have a question for you guys. Could you make that happen? Could you make the drive shaft angles change while driving the vehicle? Or is there a scenario where that could happen? I think there is. If you have a rear-wheel drive vehicle, let's just say it's a pickup truck, and you smash that throttle down, you full out, all acceleration, that throttle's gone down. What happens to the vehicle? What go back to SSB, and when you talk about those yaw, pitch, and roll, what are we going to have? We're going to have that vehicle smashed back, and all that force going back, it's going to load up the rear end of that vehicle. If we load up the rear end of that vehicle, that means the springs are going to be compressed or pushed down, which means the driveline angle is going to change. So if we load that up and the springs can't handle that, and that angle actually changes too much, we could have a vibration only on that hard acceleration. As everything else planes out, and as you start going down the road, everything levels out, that vibration will be gone. Now, if it was a drive shaft that was out of balance, or a bad U-joint or something along those lines, that would be there at all times, right? So there's scenarios where we need to think, what could make this happen? Why could this do this, based on what we see as the symptoms when we're diagnosing things. There's 4 main components to the drive shaft, as you can see here: slip yoke, universal joint, drive shaft, and final drive companion flange. That builds that drive shaft. And that's pretty much it. The slip yoke is going to slide on the output shaft, whether it's splined or connected in some way. The universal joints allow for that phase and the angle. Drive shaft itself is going to be some sort of tube. You can see here, whether it's carbon or steel, could be aluminum, depending on what's going to happen. It needs to be able to withstand the amount of torque the vehicle has. So the drive shaft is going to be pretty important if you're building a very torquey or fast vehicle, because it's got to be able to withstand the amount of power you put through it. The slip yoke, that's what we were talking about earlier. Now it's going to have a machine surface on one side that can allow for a seal to be ridden on or connected. Basically, we want a lip seal there that's going to allow for the movement back and forth, but not allow for fluid to come out of the transmission. And then we're going to have a spline side or some way to take that torque and then move this drive shaft. This allows that linear movement when the suspension moves. It allows it to go back and forth and have that suspension, not change any angles. Universal joints, fairly straightforward. You're going to have 4 bearings in cups with a cross section in the middle, and it can rotate. Again, it's not a constant velocity joint until everything's in phase, but they work very well. You probably have seen them in steering intermediate shafts, where you have a U-joint that allows it for rotating as well. And then when we get to the CV shafts, we'll talk about a couple other joints, and not the joints you're thinking of. Diagnosis, you guys should be able to kind of understand this. If something's going on, and we talked about that with the suspension and loading it up and vibrations, you're going to have clunks, squeaks, knocking noises, all these different things, whether a bearing seizes up or it's too loose, and we have those noises and what's going to happen. Some things you're going to really want to know is, speed. Is it a rotational noise? Is it when hot, when cold, what's happening? All these things will help you diagnose the vehicle a little bit better. All right, so that's rear-wheel drive pretty much. Let's quickly get through the front-wheel drive, and then It's off the differentials. So drive shafts in the front wheel drive, we can call them a few different things. If you think about a parts department, you have a whole bunch of different people calling things differently. So half shafts, drive shafts, axle shafts, all of these things mean the same thing, but what it's talking about is that constant velocity shaft that comes out of a transaxle or something like that. They're going to have inner and outer constant velocity joints. We're going to talk about the joint types and boot retention. We'll talk about that a little bit. Vibration dampener can be on that, and we'll talk about the infamous torque steer. The drive axle requires movement. Now, we have one other thing to think about when we talk about a front wheel drive: steering. So a constant velocity joint must be done here, or some sort of way to do that, because that movement of steering, right? So that axle is coming out of the transaxle. Let's just say it's a Honda Civic or something like that. We're going to have the axle straight out of that final drive, usually with a tripod joint. I guess it could be a Roseppa or a tripod. We'll see examples of those in a bit that are going to be on the transmission side. And that needs to be a plunge joint. And when I say plunge joint, let's see if we can come up with it here. There we go. If we look at that, the inboard joint there is going to be plunged. The outboard joint is going to be fixed. And if we see that outboard joint, it's going to be solid, because if it was to rotate or have linear movement, if you want to say, with that steering end, that could get a little sketchy. I wouldn't want to do that. Whereas the inboard, it's a little bit more solid. We have it directly attached to that transaxle. And you can see up here, if you can see on my mouse right here, that's where it's going to have the travel, right? So we have a solid piece here and then a travel piece here. So those are called inboard and outboard joints. Inboard is going to be towards the transaxle or towards the final drive, and outboard will be towards the wheels. Fixed and plunged, I think you can understand what's going on there. A fixed joint will not move linearly. I can't say that word right now. And a plunge joint will have that linear movement back and forth, or allow for that suspension travel. Front-wheel drive vehicles, 2 CV joints are used. We talked about that. And we talked about that. The ball type or Roseppa joint. These are a couple things you're going to want to remember. The ball type or Roseppa joint is probably the one you think of when you think of a CV axle. 6 balls in a cage that's going to be attached to the joint. And then the tripod joint, it's just what it sounds like. We have 3 lugs or bearings that are attached in a tripod or a not a cross, but like a Y that can go in and out. Both types can be used as inboard or outboard joints. If you have a European vehicle, sometimes they use that Roseppa joint for the inboard, and both are available in fixed or plunged. So if you look at this would be that Roseppa ball joint. So you're going to have the inner race here, the balls in the cage all the way around it. The boot's going to be very important. We want to have grease in there, and it's got to be a special grease. We'll talk about that in a second. And it should rotate like this, nice and smooth at a constant velocity, and everything works well. If this goes, if something's going wrong with this, you'll probably hear a rotational noise with multiple clicks as you're turning a steep angle or a severe angle. And that's usually a good way to check if the CV joint is in good condition or not. There's a fixed Roseppa joint on the top, and there's a plunge Roseppa joint on the bottom. You can see the channel it has so that can move back and forth as it's going around. The tripod joint looks like so. We're going to have that Y or the 3 bearings. There'll be a whole bunch of needle bearings in there that can rotate smoothly as it turns. And that's going to usually be the plunge joint on the inboard side. That'll allow for that movement. You can have a fixed joint as well. And then if we think about axle shafts on a rear-wheel drive vehicle, specifically the differential that's kind of locked in and mounted to the frame of the vehicle, or the pod style differential, you'll see a fixed tripod or a fixed ball joint at the inboard side, because that's not going to be moved so much, possibly. And you can see a lot of different things that way, depending on how the manufacturer wants to make it. CV boots are going to be really important. Centrifugal force happens. Centrifugal force, yeah, I said it right. Happens as the axle spins. We're going to have that flinging motion, or that motion to push everything away from it. So if we have a whole bunch of grease in there as we drive that vehicle and it speeds up, all that grease wants to spread out and get thrown away. And I'm sure you've taken a wheel off where the CV boot has been torn and you get a handful of grease that's all over the tire and the inner fender. We don't want that to happen, because then the joint itself is starved from that grease. The grease being used is going to be a high temperature special CV joint grease. Just don't throw wheel bearing grease in there. It needs to be able to withstand the heat and movement that it's going to be applied to it. Check for cracks along the boot. Make sure it's not broken or torn completely. And when you replace these, a lot of times you have to take the joint actually off, put the new boot on. You're going to crimp it with some special pliers that you can see here that will crimp it properly and allow it to work. And again, make sure you use that high temperature, high pressure grease that we've talked about. I believe, vibration dampeners. These can be added onto there, so it takes up a little bit of that frequency or that vibration that can be created. So make sure they're in the right place and installed correctly. Last thing we'll talk about is going to be torque steer. So torque steer is, if you have two different lengths of axle shafts. So say we have a driver's side, we have the transmission sitting on the driver's side of the vehicle. The driver's front wheel will be a shorter distance from that final drive to the driver's front wheel than the passenger wheel. And if that's the case, the vehicle, the amount of power going through it can change the direction of the steering, if you want to say it. I'm probably not saying that the best, but what's going to happen is it's going to pull towards the side that has the most power, basically. So on equal length drive shafts, you usually see a lot of torque steer. A way to navigate this, or to alleviate it a little bit, is to add in an intermediate shaft. I think the next slide has a picture of it. Does an intermediate shaft there. What this does is we have a support bracket on the engine that's going to be mounted, and it's going to hold the power basically so that the angle doesn't start till after that. So if you see right here, we have our drive shaft length is the same on the right hand and left hand side. That intermediate shaft will take the power and just transfer it over before that angle starts happening. So it'll help do that a little bit. Sometimes you may see it, and it also depends on how you drive. If you really like to throw it into gear and whatnot, that'll change things. All right, that's the first lesson. There'll probably be 7 or 8 of these, depending on how compact we do. I'm hoping to keep them pretty low key and easy. Let me know what you think. Hopefully they'll get better from this one, because apparently I couldn't talk today. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great day. And until next time, take care.